So Lucy, can you tell us why it is important to be discussing land tenure and resource rights here today at the Permanent Forum on Indigenous Issues, not anywhere else? Why here today? And how is the topic relevant to the multiple networks you're part of, including your work on gender, on climate, on forest, and sustainable development agenda, and the different agendas you're trying to advance? Because of course, Lucy is part of multiple networks. But why is it important today, and why discussing it here at the Permanent Forum?
I hope I get it right. Okay. Thank you very much, and good evening, everyone. I think this is a very important question you ask, and I think the beginning when you introduced the topic and the side event, and also when UN Forest, New York Forum, on forests really spoke. They brought out the data. Both of you brought out the data. Asking a question, why are we discussing this? This is very important because land is everything for Indigenous people. It's their livelihoods, it's their life, it's their identity. Without land, they cannot identify themselves. And actually, it comes out with many issues: traditional knowledge, your language, your everything that we are discussing here is why we are here and why it's important to discuss. Maybe one could also ask why not other times and so on. But land has become an issue for Indigenous people for many, many years. No matter how many times you discuss, there's still an issue. Why? Because that land carries very important resources that are very crucial to Indigenous people. It's the one that we have already had, that land, the biodiversity, 80% of biodiversity is found in those lands. It's the forests where they get everything from it. And it's because Indigenous people have protected and have looked after those resources for many years. But now they become victims of being, victimized because of they are protecting the lands, protecting all the resources in it. Large-scale mining, small-scale mining, everything is happening in those lands. And there is demand for that as population get, bigger and bigger. And for governments, when they want to really, gain some money and all these, the main focus is Indigenous people's land. Because most of the time they look at those lands and they say, nobody lives here, these are wastelands, they are not, And this is very crucial for Indigenous people to keep on, talking about them. For example, the forest people and even the pastoralists and others, like for Africa, we have the pastoralists who have got their own traditional way of life. They move from place to place to look for pasture. So when they move here and people are only a small population left, they believe that there are no people there. The forest people, they know the way to manage their forest. So that's why it's very, very important to really discuss these issues. And why here in New York? Because no matter how much Indigenous people try to speak in their own countries, it's still an issue. It's still nobody understands them. Nobody really wants to accept what they are talking about. And they are all the time seen like they resist because they bring the issue of human rights, which is something very, most governments don't want to hear about human rights, especially from the continents that we come from. So it's very important to bring here where the UN can listen to us. And since our governments are also part of the UN, they are members of the UN, we think that this is a way that is very important to be able to channel those particular recommendations. It's also a good way because it's a very important subject to discuss in these areas, because if you look at all the development aspects, they are related. It's not only, you can't do one in one. You've just mentioned about the Sustainable Development Goals, the Agenda 2030 and the biodiversity Aichi targets. Everything is related towards the land and towards development. And it can only happen if there is land for that. And for my networks, if I talk about the women whom I work with and the different communities I work with, that's where we get our food, that's where we get our medicine, the firewood, the fuel, everything that communities and the women and Indigenous people use. That's where people go for prayers. That's where the sacred sites are. It's our home. It's our important things. And if you look at land, if we are talking about sustainable development goals and we are trying to talk about eliminating poverty, we are not doing anything if we don't have land. if we talk about eliminating hunger and even health, the 3 goals, we really have to make sure that at least the women especially have got access and have got access to that land where they can cultivate, get food, go to the forest and look for medicine, because not every other day they can be able to get to go to the hospital and buy their own medicine and so on. So it's a very crucial I don't want to call it item, but it's a very crucial topic to be able to discuss and to look at it. And for women, because I want to share my experiences working with the women, when we started working with the women and trying to get them improve their livelihoods, get enough food for the children, the first thing was, where do we get land to do that? Considering that most of the indigenous peoples, we have cultures and women don't own land. It's very difficult to be able to say that a woman is owning from a pastoral community, owning 1 acre of land or even 10 acres, unless it's the group of women who have bought it. And we started that process by trying to work with our own, because if you work on your own, it's also a difficult thing. And when we started working with the men in the community, they were able to give women small spaces just to have a kitchen garden. And that is where you begin, by realizing why it's important to have land and access land for women, so that they can be able to have food and to cultivate food and be able to manage their own homes. And that's where the beginning was. And by the time it took about 2 years, the men were even able to increase that land, to give more access land to women, because they see they are feeding home, they can sell the food and they can be able to buy small things and supplement what they already have, which is very crucial for the family. And I just want to also say that looking at the question of Agenda 2030, there is no way it can succeed without women being involved fully. I looked at also at the forum, the declaration, the New York Declaration on Forest, and I still believe that if we involve more women to be able to be active and to be able to really help in terms of looking at the different goals that we've already mentioned, Goal 10, I looked at the declaration, and there is really a lot that we can be able to work together, but you cannot work in a single hand. You have to work collectively. Indigenous people, women, and other civil society have to really work together in order to be able to implement it. The problem is these policies are there, but they are not implemented. We don't see how they are implemented. Maybe even some people don't know already that there is this declaration that is somewhere in about forests.
Yeah, that's
probably they don't know that it's there. We are talking about land. How many land policies, how many land laws do we have in different countries? What happens to them? Are they really implemented? So we have to look at ways and means, and I'm really looking forward for this permanent forum to see how we can really, they can come up with really recommendations that can be able to reach out to many more, not only to UN agencies, but to donors and to different partners, FAOs and the rest, and so that we can see how we can work collectively together as a team to implement some of the issues that are very crucial in terms of looking at food security and looking at the sustainable development goals. And of course, the Aichi targets, which we have clearly managed. And remember, lands also hold natural resources, which are very crucial for us. So it's a wholesome, holistic way that we do, and we should also look at it in a human rights perspective, and not just leave it and just have it as development, but development that does not really look at human rights issues and basic rights issues for different communities, and especially women.